Today, we're going to dive into one of the most famous and maybe one of the most revealing studies in all of social psychology, the Asch Experiment. It's a really powerful look at something we've all felt at some point, that undeniable weight of peer pressure. So let me start by asking you a question. Imagine you're in a room, and everyone, and I mean everyone, is saying something that you know is clearly, obviously wrong. What do? Do you speak up? Do you trust your own eyes? Or do you just go along with the crowd? It seems like it should be a simple choice, but as we're about to see, the answer is way more complicated than you might think. All right, so back in the 1950s, a social psychologist named Solomon Asch was totally captivated by this exact problem. He wanted to know just how powerful is social pressure. Really? Could it actually make someone conform, even when they knew for a fact that the group was wrong? So to figure this out, he designed this brilliant, incredibly simple experiment, and he disguised it as just a vision test. Asch brought in groups of male college students, telling them they were just taking part in a simple perception study. You know, nothing to worry about. The setup was super straightforward. All they had to do was look at some lines and judge their length. But of course, there was a huge twist they knew nothing about. Here's how it worked. The group was shown two cards. The first card had a single reference line. The second card had 3 comparison lines on it. The task? Just say which of the 3 lines matched the first one. Simple, right? The answer was always completely obvious, but the real trick was in the details. Everyone in the room had to call out their answer one by one, and our real participant, well, he was always seated to answer last, or at least near the end, only after hearing what almost everyone else had to say. So, what happens when the group starts giving the wrong answer? This is where the experiment gets its punch. You see, everyone else in the room, apart from our one real participant, was an actor. In psychology, we call them confederates. And on certain trials, these actors were all instructed to unanimously give the same, clearly incorrect answer. The results were, frankly, staggering. 75%. That's how many participants caved to group pressure and gave the wrong answer at least one time. Just think about that for a second. 3 out of every 4 people went against the clear evidence of their own eyes just to go along with the group. And this wasn't just a one-off thing. Across all of those critical trials, the ones where the actors were giving the wrong answer, the average rate of conformity was 37%. That means that more than a third of the time, people chose to agree with a group they knew was wrong rather than state the obvious truth. And the impact of this pressure becomes so clear when you just look at the data. In the control group, where people judged the lines all by themselves, the error rate was less than 1%. I mean, they were basically perfect. But in the experimental group, the one with all the peer pressure, accuracy just plummeted. All of a sudden, people were only getting it right about 63% of the time. That is a huge drop, and it really shows you how powerful that social situation was. So this leads to the million-dollar question. Why? Why would so many smart people agree with something that was so obviously false? Well, when Asch interviewed the participants afterward, he found that there were really 2 powerful psychological forces pushing them. The first one is what we call normative influence. This is that classic, very human desire to fit in. You know the answer is wrong, but you conform anyway because you want to avoid the awkwardness or ridicule of being the odd one out. The second force is informational influence. This is the desire to be right. When you see a whole group of people unanimously agreeing on something, you start to second-guess yourself. You think, wait, maybe they see something I don't, and you conform because you genuinely start to believe the group knows better.
And this quote from one of the participants just perfectly captures that normative influence. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to look stupid. It's just such a profoundly human thing to say, right? A lot of the people who conformed later admitted they never actually believed the group's answer. They just went along with it to not make waves.
But here's where the story gets a little more hopeful. Not everyone conformed. So Asch started tweaking his experiment to figure out, okay, what helps people resist this pressure? How do you actually break the spell of the group? He found 3 really key things that could pretty much shatter the group's power. First, just introduce one other person who also disagrees with the majority, a dissenting partner. Second, let people give their answers privately, like in writing. And third, the size of the group itself. Interestingly, he found the pressure was strongest with about 3 or 4 people. Adding more actors didn't really increase the effect. The power of having an ally was just incredible. When just one other person in the room, a true partner, also gave the correct answer, conformity just plummeted. It went from over 30% all the way down to just 5%. It turns out having even a single person backing you up is often enough to give you the courage to stick to your guns. So why are we still talking about a study from the 1950s? I mean, why does it matter so much today? Well, because these fundamental forces of conformity, they haven't gone anywhere. The Asch experiment gives us a timeless and maybe a little unsettling lesson about human nature itself.
In fact, get this, a major replication study from just 2023 found a conformity rate of 33% using the very same line task. That is almost identical to what Asch found over 70 years ago. It just goes to show you this pressure to conform is a really durable, persistent part of how we operate socially.
And we're not just talking about lines on a card here. That same 2023 study showed this effect stretches to really complex things, like our political opinions. For example, when a group said that trade unions should have more power, 72% of the participants agreed. But when the group said no to the same question, agreement crashed down to just 29%. That is a massive 43-point swing based purely on what the group said. And you see a similarly huge effect for the question about corporate freedom. And all of this brings us back to that final, crucial question. The Asch experiment really forces us to look at our own lives. When everyone around you seems to be in perfect agreement, how do you know? How do you decide if you're standing for the truth or if you're just standing with the crowd?